Well, hello. It's been a little while since we've been working in the shop, and I thought I'd make a little video today for you. Nice sunny Saturday winter day. We're at the router table, and I've got a straight cutting bit set up in my router table. Let me zoom you in here. Right there. You can see a straight cutting bit. And what I'm going to do is make a rabbet on the end of that board. And I've got that laid out. I think that's the easiest way, is probably just to lay it out on the end of your board and then use that to set it up. Actually, that's a fairly good size rabbet, so I'm going to split it in half and take 2 passes there. So I'm going to do this in 2 passes. All right, so how do I set this up? Well, I've got my straight cutting bit already in the machine. We'll change that in a little bit because I want to show you something else that we can do on the router table. I'm going to set the height, so it's a bit too tall there. So let's lower that down. And on this particular table, there is a crank right here, which is going to raise and lower the bit. On the other router table, over here, the crank drops in, and then once you set your bit height, you just remove it. Okay, so that's really the difference between our 2 router tables. I don't have a preference, one style over the other. I like both of them. So I'm going to set the bit height with this crank on the end. That looks pretty accurate right there. We'll zoom you in, let you have a look at it. Pretty accurate right there. And the second thing I want to do is set the fence. So I don't want to take all this material off at once. I already said that. It's too much. I'm going to take light cuts whenever possible. So I'm going to set my board right there. That's half of it. That's what I want to cut. I'm going to pull the fence over and secure. See that back there? Right there? And there's one way over on the other side too, way over here. Make sure both of them are secure. Okay? Don't worry so much about the fence being parallel, because I'm not using a saw blade like a table saw. I'm just using a router bit, and as long as I'm not using this track in the fence, in the table, excuse me, then it doesn't matter if the fence is parallel to the bit or not. So anyway, that's how routers work, because it just sits still and it's going to spin in a rotation, pretty fast rotation, probably about 15,000 RPM. That's pretty fast. So the last thing I need to do is bring my guard over top of the bit now that I have the height and the fence set. Make sure you bring that guard over top, please. All right, so I left you a little note here on the table, and that says that I'm going to feed right to left. If you try to feed against that arrow and you go left to right, you're going to launch this piece, okay? So we don't want to do that, and we definitely don't want to stand, well, you don't want to stand right where my camera is right now. That's behind the router table, so hopefully I hang on to this. Otherwise, well, if you guys hit the floor, I guess, you know what happened. I could just push this with my fingers, and as soon as my hand hits the guard, I'm going to jump over. Or, if you're not comfortable with that, or your piece is too small, you could use a push stick. The push stick this way is going to hit the guard, but I like to put it this way, and that way you can push it through securely and just keep your hand on top. So whatever you prefer. It does need to stay down to the table and up against the fence. So now that we have everything set up, let's go ahead and get this plugged in, and we'll be right back. Okay. So we've got the router table all plugged in and it's good to go. This switch is a little bit different. I'll show you this one down here. Because this top right here is going to flip out. It's not a normal start-stop button switch like the rest of our machines. This one's a little bit different, so I thought I'd take a minute and show you that. All right, here we go. Pass number 1. So I've made that pass. Now I need to move my fence back, and you'll notice that I'm only going to move one knob. I'm not going to touch the other side. It doesn't matter, because I just want to bump this back, and I'm going to turn my router bit a little bit so I can get a better look at that. And I'm going to push this fence back. You can see the space opening up in here between the board. So as I push that back, I want to be looking at my line. So I think that's going to be right about there. Okay. I just moved this knob here on this end. I didn't move the other one. I could have moved the other one and not move this one. It doesn't matter. But just move one. You don't need to move two. And honestly, I probably wouldn't have shut the router off to do that. Just to make a small adjustment, I probably would have left it running, but you wouldn't have been able to hear me. So here we go, second pass, just like the first one. Well, look at that. I'd say that's pretty accurate. There's our rabbet down our board. We did it in 2 passes, and that's that. Okay, so for my next operation, what I want to do is I want to change the bit. So I was using this straight cutting bit. I can go ahead and move the guard out of the way. I was using this straight cutting bit right there. And now what I want to do is I would like to take the corner off of this piece of wood, this piece of material here, red oak if you want to be specific. So I want to take this corner off, and to do that I'm going to use a corner rounding bit. So this one's a little different because it's got this ball bearing, this pilot end, this ball bearing here. And the straight bit did not have that. So first thing I want to do is switch these out, and you're probably going to have to change the bit at some point. So how do we start that process? Here are the steps. The first thing I want to do is make sure my router table is unplugged. Well, that pilot cord means both router tables are unplugged, or I could just look to the power strip down there and make sure that my router table is unplugged. Either way, I want to make sure this is unplugged because I don't want to get wrenches on a router and have somebody hit the button. I will send one of those wrenches flying. So I don't want that. All right. So now I got to move the fence back. I've got to move this black plate, and the fence is sitting on top of it. So I'm going to loosen the fence. And this side over here, same way. Now I can just push that back. And this wrench has these 2 pins. So that's going to lock into the holes right there. A 1/4 turn will remove that. Okay, so I'll just set that aside. And now I'm going to go back to that crank that I showed you over here and raise this bit up. I want to come just about to the top where it gently starts to get tight, then just stop. Okay, this is far enough anyway. And what it does is it makes it easier to get to these two collet nuts. Can you see those right there? Those two collet nuts. And this is a Porter cable style router. Some of the other manufacturers do it differently. I have a couple Bosch routers. Our CNC has a Bosch in it, and they use two different size wrenches. Porter cable, as far as I can ever remember, has always done this style. And they use two of the same size wrenches here. So I've got one that's got a little bend to it. I have a friend in the metal shop, so we put a bend in this. And that makes it easy to get to the bottom collet nut. And the other wrench is just straight. And this is how they came in the box with the router. So this one goes on the top. So I'm sure you can't see my hands, but let me back up a little bit here, because if I'm holding these two wrenches, when I'm loosening this, the straight wrench is in my left hand. And you're going to see when I tighten this, I'm going to switch hands. See how I did that? The straight wrench now is on the right side. The motion is the same. It's kind of that squeezing together butterfly motion. I believe people in the weight room refer to that as a butterfly press. But I'm loosening, so I'm going to be over here. Try your best to keep those wrenches held on the collet nut. And see how that's loose now? That wasn't very tight. Or maybe I have visited the butterfly press once or twice over in the weight room. Anyway, so that's loose. Now this bit is hard to get out of there. I don't want to take the whole collet off because there's some very fine machine threads in here. And if I take the collet on and off a lot, then it wears those threads out. Or if I don't get it aligned just right, then I ruin the threads and I ruin the whole router. And they're about $160 to replace. So I don't want to mess up those threads. So don't take the collet off. We usually don't. I'm going to turn this. This is tight. The collet still has a hold of it in there. So what I'm going to do, let me back you up a little bit here so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to take my wrench and I'm going to tap very gently on the back side of the bit, not where the sharpened cutting edge is. I don't want to break one of those carbide cutting edges. I'm going to tap on the back, and now the bit will release. So just tap very gently. Also, since this is a straight cutting bit, be careful when you pull this out of there. Watch where your fingers are. Don't put them right on the cutting edges. If you slide your fingers up those sharp cutting edges, you'll have more red on the router table than just these wrenches. So be careful. That could be bad. I like to grab it on the non-sharpened sides, so over here. So I'm not grabbing the sharp cutting edges, and it should just pull up right up out of there. Okay, so there's my bit. I've removed the straight cutting bit. I'm going to reverse all the steps I just said, so I'm going to go a little bit faster. Here is my corner rounding bit. I believe this is about a 1/4 inch radius here. So now I'm going to take that. These are a little bit easier. You got something to hold on to, and you can just push that down in the collet. Pull it up just a little bit. I pushed it all the way down and then lifted it, probably about 1/8 of an inch or so. And I'm just going to use my finger for now to hold that, tighten the collet nut. Now remember, I switched hands. This one's on the right now because I'm tightening. Again, I want to hold that on the bottom, the bent wrench on the bottom, and give this a squeeze right there, okay? So it needs to be fairly tight, especially the straight bits. They will slide up out of the collet if you don't tighten them down securely, but we don't need to get crazy. And there's my donut or my plate. So I'll put that back in and give that a 1/4 turn, secures it. and this wrench comes right off. Okay? So now, as you can see, this bit is quite a bit above the table. I want to get this corner right here let's adjust you just a little bit right there. Okay, I want to get this corner of the bit level with my table surface. Okay, so let's back that up a little bit, and I'm going to lower the crank. And let me find you a better angle here, and we'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so this was my corner rounding bit right here, and now that I've got the camera level with the table, you can see exactly what I'm at. I'm lowering the bit, and I want to get this corner, the sharpened corner, level with my table surface. Otherwise, I'm going to have an extra groove in my board that I may or may not want. Right now, today, I'm not really looking for that. So, what do you think? Right there? I can always check it with a board. I like to bring my board over. That looks pretty good right there. That's that corner I was looking for right there. Okay, so I just want to take the corner of this board off right there that I shaded for you, and that's going to do that. All right, so the second thing I want to do is I want to set my fence. So let me move my camera back around and I'll show you how to do that. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I'm not going to use this bearing or this guide end. I'm going to hide that in the space of the fence back here. So I want to pull my fence forward so that it's sitting right here in line with the front edge of that wheel. And I can use my board. I'll just lift it up a little bit, and I can bring my fence just forward. So any bit that has that pilot end, when you're at a router table, if your board is straight, this is probably how you want to set it up. So I use my board. There we go. So if I'm moving that wheel is just not turning. So let's take a look and see what that is. If I move you over a little bit, you can look right down the fence there. You can see that this wheel is not really sticking out right there. So that's right in line with my fence. And that's what I want. Okay? Okay, so now that I have my bit set up, I've got the correct bit installed. I showed you how to change that. I set the height of my bit, and I also set the fence. So now I'm ready to run my roundover on the corner. We're going to take that off, that part that I shaded right there. Okay, so again, I'm going to follow the feed on the table. I've already plugged the router back in, so I'm ready to go here. The last thing I want to remind you is that the guard is way down the fence, way over there still. So I need to pull the guard over. If my piece of material is big enough that I can put my hands on it, I don't want to be using my bare hands without a guard. That's not a good idea. But hey, I was given these freebies from the Micro Jig company, who donated a couple of these. Not a sponsor or anything, but they donated them to schools that have table saws, and I think they're going to be really handy for the router table. So thank you for the donation, and this is how I'm going to use it. So this is going to sit right on my piece of stock, and it has this support leg out here. So depending on the thickness of your stock, this is going to have to be adjusted. And I'm not routing all the way through, so I'm not worried about cutting the bottom, but there are some sacrificial pieces here that you can buy replacements and whatnot. So that's okay too. All right, so I'm going to set that there, and I need to loosen these 2 screws, and I need to set my support leg. So simply hold it down firmly, press the support leg down for the thickness of stock that you're running, tighten up those screws, and you're good to go. So if I had a longer piece, I would run 2 of these. I have 2. They donated 2. But this one is not long enough. It's just a little bit longer than my gripper. So I'm just going to use 1. And I could put my other hand up top, and I'm simply going to run that right over. So I can't run this and the guard. So as long as I don't do anything crazy, I'll keep my hands on the handle. Should be fine. Are you ready? Here we go. So I must have shaded a round over a little bigger than my bit, but you got the idea. There is my round over. And my gripper worked beautifully. So I will continue to use those. I think it's a cool tool. Certainly better than using your hands. I could have ended up with a line on the front if there was a line right down here. Then that means my bit was too high, or, well, I wouldn't have ended up with a line in the back because I would have hit the pilot bearing. So anyway, if I ended up with a line on the back, that means I chose the wrong bit. That means I grabbed a beating bit instead of a round over bit. Pretty similar, but different size bearings. So anyhow, that's what we're going for. And that's the router table. So good luck.